I'm gonna try to do a science so that I can do a art. What's up, folks? I'm Odd, by the way. And today we are taking another look at a, frenemy, I guess. This is a kit that I ordered and I made a video talking about a couple months ago at this point. And I bought it off Amazon because it said that it was for adults and artists specifically, and I mean, I guess you could probably already tell based off of the whatever the title of this video is going to be, but it sucks. Pretty bad, actually. So I'm going to be trying my best to be using a myriad of kind of like household art hacks things to try and fix some of the products inside of this kit. It's not all terrible, but it's not good. So I'm going to be trying my best to take a crack at doing some stuff with it. Yes. First up is the paper. I don't know if I'm going to be able to save this. I don't like the texture of it, but I've seen a few things on having sealant on either the front or the back to try and remedy any thinness of a piece of paper so that it feels more sturdy, basically, or it acts more sturdy and things don't bleed through as easily. And I do have sealant that maybe might be a bit more appropriate for this, but also, I don't have good ventilation in this room, and currently, outside looks like this. So, instead, I'm going to be trying to use this giant-ass bucket of Elmer's glue that we've had for ages that is barely even empty. Even though I've used it for a multitude of projects. And I think that I'm going to experiment with multiple ways of putting together this paper, or try it on the front, on the back. Might glue two pieces of paper together. I might even go a little crazy and try and glue one of those pieces to one of the acrylic board things that came with it, because that's weird. It only really works with the acrylics, and it doesn't work well at all. So that's what I'm going to be doing with that. This is the current drying setup that I have for the papers. You know, just hanging out on the line that I use to hang my background. As for the other products, and let's go through a bit more, the aforementioned acrylics in this little drawer here are fine. They're fine. They're not bad. They're cheap paint. I don't use paint often enough to tell you the major differences between that and any heavy body acrylics that I've used for, say, school. Other than the fact that they're a little thin, and that is the major issue, because there's so little of them. If you looked at the size of them, they're very small tubes, and there's a lot of very different colors. So what I'm going to try and do is both stretch out and kind of reinforce these, try and reinforce these little paints by mixing them with cornstarch, which is another hack that I saw. So that's going to be our next attempt. The colored pencils, which are lackluster, I'm going to be dipping in, I guess, what I have for petroleum jelly, which is also some completely unlabeled off-brand vapor rub that I hope doesn't kill me. So we're going full-on homemade here. And now the only one that I didn't see stuff for, well, the only two really, three. The ones that I didn't see stuff for, I guess I didn't totally look up, were the crayons, the oil pastels, and the watercolor. Now, for the crayons and the oil pastels, I think that I'm probably just going to resort to heating them up a little bit, and I think that that will probably be my means of trying to make them feel better. I think that that would be a good start at the very least. And for the watercolors, I thought that I would do a little bit more of an experiment, because I figured because they already have some degree of binder in them, and I don't have any any glycerin or agar on hand. that I would instead just try and remix them with water and honey and just see if I can get overall like a smoother consistency. This suspiciously yellow liquid is not pee, I promise. It's honey and water and actually a little bit of clove oil because we surprisingly had that on hand. The number of things in this household from random projects that we just have laying around that can be used for other things, it's wonderful sometimes. Sometimes you need it when you least expect it, so glad to have it at least, I guess. But yeah, this is about a cup of water, 2 tablespoons of honey, and a couple drops of clove oil. And my main thought was that I would basically depan these like one at a time, put them in this little dish, smash them up, put this in it, remix them, and then put it back in the pan, basically. Alright, so we've got 5 experimental watercolors to deal with here, of these little, like, wet ones. So, I'm gonna leave these to dry for a couple of days. I thought that these would be, like, the palettes would be softer than they turned out being, and I guess that was kind of my bad to assume that. I, literally at some point or another tried to mull it with a rock. That didn't totally turn out, so I just kind of kept chipping at it with the knife until they were relatively powdery enough to mix with the solution. So yes, if you saw him hanging out, he was just here for emotional support after my attempt to use him to beat up the pallets, so but I got there eventually, I guess. So hopefully these turn out relatively well. I'm gonna leave these while I deal with everything else, literally, because I figured this would take the longest, so this is the first thing that I did. It may not seem that way, it might be out of order, but we'll have to see. Alright. But yeah, I'm hoping that I can at least use them. I know it takes a while for them to dry after you reactivate them like that, so I'm hoping that at the very least I can use them a little wet after doing this, because I'm like this usually goes up within a couple of days of me recording, so I don't really have like months to wait for it to dry. I hope that that's not going to be too much of an issue. I don't think that it should. I'm not totally looking for longevity in these paints. I think I could definitely keep up an update for whether or not they last. But that's not my major concern here. My major concern is making something that feels and works a little bit better for at least one piece for these art supplies, so that I can say that I tried my best to work with them. Because I know I joke about having bad spending habits, okay? But I grew up poor and we are waste not, want not in this family. So I'm going to try my best to do something with them that looks cool and maybe have art supplies that I actually want to work with. So then I'm probably going to jump over and do all that stuff and talk a little bit about the process and what happens with that. So I'll see you there. Alright, let's start testing these out. So first up, we've got the papers, which I'm probably still not going to use because they're quite warped from the process of the glue, but I figured I would at least test the bleed to see where they're at in terms of that, and I figured that for that we would do a bit of a gauntlet with both my alcohol markers and Sharpies, which I mean are also alcohol based, but they're a little bit different formula, I think, and they bleed through everything. So what better way to test them? So this is one side, and I'm going to do it on the glued side to start with other art supplies. So far, it's pretty nice. And it's not immediately tearing up itself. Okay. So maybe this wasn't a total failure. Let's see if I can blend. Maybe we're good markers to pick to blend, but we're here. Yeah, I'm not mad. If I was left with some time, maybe to flatten out a little bit longer. I did only keep it in the book for a couple of hours. Like, at the very least, the alcohol markers aren't bleeding through it, which I guess I kind of already knew. I just picked some of the worst colors, although some of the pigment of the Sharpie is sticking. But that could just be user error. Unsure. Very legitimate tests here. It's doodles. Let's see. Okay, so the Sharpie did bleed through. Actually, only that first heart where there was... seemed like there was quite a bit of ink anyway. Don't totally know why. Maybe I was just pressing down too much. But the rest of them... Oh, you know what? Maybe it's just due to my uneven distribution of glue. You know? Yeah. I would say that the coating method at least very much works for that. In terms of texture, let me grab something that would respond to some bite. Let's just see how this feels now. Huh. Okay, so it feels better, I think, than it did. Because before it was very scratchy, and now it's just sort of glidey, almost. But not quite. Okay, so the watercolor isn't going to be sinking in because it's just sitting on top of that glue. So that's one problem with this side. Although I do wonder having it on the other side might help. So that's on the front. Let's try the back. See if it has any significant difference. Now, I wonder if just... the original paper texture is probably going to be very present here. And again, it's very warped. Actually kind of wants to drink up this ink. So it's taking quite a bit to get onto it. Let's see what that looks like on the other side. And ooh, okay, significant bleedage, actually. Huh. Weird. I guess... no, did it? I think it bled between the pages because there's a little bit on my guide here. One second. My protector. Yeah, I think that still bleeds through a little bit. Well, front side is fine because it kind of sits on top of the glue. Back side, not so much. Just for the heck of it, let's do watercolor pencil. I guess we could do the Sharpie, but I know that that's going to seep through. So, that's not bad, I guess. Yeah, let's do a bit of a stress test on this paper and see if maybe wet on wet makes it act up a little bit. Or dry on wet, even. Wet on wet. Let's see if I can get some on the brush here. I mean, the paper itself is obviously very warped, but it's not bad. It's not bad, I guess. At least because it's not being torn up. So, that's a benefit. But I don't know if it's from the glue. Or just maybe this paper is tougher than I gave it credit for initially. Let's just keep going. And I'll point out anything significant. Let's see. Okay. Speed round. Friggin' both sides. So, red star, red star. Oh, that's a weird texture. Oh no. Did I find a hole? I think I found maybe a little bit of a divot in my glue. Yep, definitely. So I think that's more of a user error. Although it is kind of coming through in speckles. Hold on, let me see if I can't get somewhere where it's... yeah. If you had something even coverage, like the sealant I probably should have used, or hairspray probably would do better, and it probably would still only be really good for like sketchbooks, which is usually recommended for. Let's test the both sides real quick and see if that did any significance to the paper. Oh, this stuff just eats up this marker, though. It's not quite as bad with the blue, so maybe the green is just running out, but... Ugh, this paper just soaks up everything. But both sides glued together definitely, or not both sides, glued together, it does hold up a little bit better, although it is starting to seep through a little bit, so maybe I could be mistaken. Let's try. Both sides glued together and glued on. It's such an interesting texture when the glue is fully applied to this, because it's almost glidey. Well, but if you brush it on, you could end up with uneven application, which I think is my case here, and you wind up with stuff like that. An ugly stripe down the bottom that was not intentional. Or it could be where the glue is still wet. Who knows? Who knows? It kind of looks cool. It's got like a splatchy look to it, but it's not what I intended, so... Yeah. I think overall, like, we probably don't even need to test these other ones. I will. Let's do glue on the back side, two sides together. I think the overall consensus is that it's like the sealant method works in terms of making sure the paper is well protected, at least protected enough in a sketchbook, as to markers not immediately bleeding through it. But I don't know if it says anything about the quality of the paper. Or does anything to the quality of the paper, and I don't think gluing two pieces together is going to help us much, other than with maybe some errant bleeding, but there's a little dot right there. That came through even on the glued side. And then this is both sides glue two together. So this one's supposed to be our strongest candidate, and oh no, she's ugly. She's ugly and it might be my fault. Ooh. Okay. Yeah, no, that's splotchiness. That could be from the glue. That could be from the glue that I used. And not necessarily from the paper, like, obviously, but... it doesn't exactly work this way, so... Sealant, maybe even hairspray, would probably work better than just brushing on glue, I think, is our consensus, and that was probably my bad, but, like, also that paper is still pretty shitty, so I'm not going to be using it. Also, it took way too long to prepare, so no thank you. So, I guess the good thing about this paper is that it's decent enough to use for, you know, testing things out, at least. So, for our paints, I got a standard color and a metallic, and I'm going to use the same standard color and metallic that I mixed earlier with cornstarch over jaw. And we're going to see how they look in comparison side by side. So the red looks like this by itself. And it's not bad. Again, like I said, these paints are fine. They're fine. I'm not too mad about, I guess, the pigment or the quality of them. I mean, they're okay. For the kit, it's just their size that got me. Especially compared to everything, because it's like everything else was so shitty. And it's like, oof, really? Okay. So... and this is the metallic, which I believe by nature these are already pretty thick compared to the normal colors. Yeah, you can see that spreads out pretty far. It's nice. It's got nice coverage. It's fairly opaque. Actually, what I could have done is drawn a line. Here's a line. Here's a line. Start with the metallic. Make sure the pen is dry. And just try to go over that line in one stripe. It's not perfect. Which, I mean, yeah, I guess they're not very opaque, which is a bit of a shame with how little of these paints there are, which is why we're using the cornstarch method to see if that works. I've seen success with it before, so I'm cautiously optimistic. But first, let's test these over this line by themselves. Well, this red is not doing well. They're fine. They're fine. They're... Oh god, that's weirdly opaque, or weirdly clear, transparent. But you know, maybe that's your vibe. Maybe you need something thin to see your sketch under. But it's too little paint! So let's see. Let me get my lines down. And let's see how the cornstarch paints hold up. This is red. It definitely feels thicker. So. Oh yeah, look at that. Look at that. That is a way thicker body. You can see the strokes much more clearly. It's still not very opaque, but this one looks like it could cover it in like fewer layers at least. Because she's just so thick. Well, yeah. Well, yeah. It does a better job acting the part of at least a thick body acrylic, which, I mean, I guess it depends on your preference, but I mean, that's kind of what I expect out of these tubes, you know? Because I got a lot of tubes like that when I was taking art classes, and those are incredibly heavy-bodied acrylics. And now I'm curious to see if the metallics work. There's silver. It's gold. Silver. So this is the silver post cornstarch as well. I'm curious to see how shiny it still looks. Oh, it looks way darker. What the hell? Still got some sheen to it, but it's like a gunmetal. Do you see that? Of course you do. You're watching it, but this is the same paint. Is this darker? A little bit. I guess it's just the thickness, and definitely covering this line, holy shit. The thickness of the paint itself kind of changes the, I guess, the amount of light that the pigment takes in or something. I'm not totally sure. It's cool, but it's definitely not like this silver. It's like a dark silver. Interesting. Okay. Unless I just accidentally mixed this with black. I don't think I did. Okay, yeah, that's so weird. And so cool. Okay, cool. Next up, we have Vaseline and colored pencils. And if this works, I'm curious about another idea. First, though, let's get a good test swatch of each of these pencils that we're working with. They're a little gross. They're not very opaque. Generally not a fun time. I got 3 relatively different colors so that we could see the difference a bit more clearly. So let's take a dip here. It's gonna be so gooey. Oh, it smells like vapor rub. Okay. So this is with vapor rub. Black. Okay. It's a little oily, but I see the vibe. Oh yeah. I don't know if that's worth it. It is a bit darker than when we started. Okay, let's try with the purple. Somehow I think that might have made it worse. But I am unsure. Let's try this guy. Okay, I think it kind of works with this one. Okay. Again, this is just so oily. Also, it smells because I'm using Vapor Rub. I also don't know if this would do very well mixed media style like I intend to use it. But I also kind of wanted to test this out with crayons and the oil pastels to see if it did anything similar. So, let's take a look at this crayon. As you can see, they're not bad, but they're flaky. They rub everywhere. They're messy. Not my favorite. So let's see how they do with this. And if that improves anything. I mean, a little bit. It makes them glide nicer. Overall, it doesn't really get rid of any of the qualities that make them meh for me, though. Also, I think it's kind of melting it. Oh! Hi, Grim! You see the camera? Hi, Beeps! Oh, don't get up here. Don't get up here. It's not good for you. Yeah, I don't know if this is gonna be for me. Not for the project that I want to do. Here's the oil pastel with it, I guess. Yeah, it's still crap. Yeah. Not my favorite. Okay. Well, that's kind of a bust. It probably works with other stuff. It just doesn't work with these. Last, but certainly not least, we have the watercolors that I reconstituted or tried to. Don't they look yummy? You know, they've been sitting for about 2 days. They're not totally hard. At least not as hard as the other ones in the pan. But I'm going to give them a try. Where did my watercolor pen go? But for a brief comparison, let's get 2 colors out here from the watercolor palette, which isn't bad. My main problem that I had with it last time is that it doesn't seem to want to play well with others, which I may just need to work around. But this is a standard of this set. It's not bad. It's definitely usable, especially if you just want to do watercolor. You could definitely get the same cheap watercolor for next to nothing by itself and not get a $40 kit. So, and alright, so let's see one of these reconstituted watercolors and see if I did anything to them other than ruin them. I mean, there are some chunks, but at least they work. God, they smell like clove oil. At least they work. Still. Okay, so then the moment is just a wait. Moment of truth is just a way to see how these behave with others, like, say, the watercolor or the pencils. The color pencils. This one is already mostly dry. It doesn't help that the pencils aren't very good. It's actually still a little damp, so the pencil isn't being too weird about it. Yeah, maybe I just used too much of them before. Maybe I just expected too much pigment out of them. Too much pigment out of the pencils. I can't tell. I'll pause and come back. Okay, so upon further inspection, it does seem as though the pencils do have a harder time showing up on top of these ones over here than they do on these ones. So maybe that's an improvement. I guess the only thing is that this does still leave a bit of residue. Does this? I can't tell. I can't tell if that's just... Yeah, that's just the paper. I was gonna say, I can't tell if this has, like, excess pigment in it. Or if it's just powdery. It's a little bit of both. I don't think that I improved it. I don't think that I made it much worse. I think that I just mixed some water back into watercolors and then let them dry again. So, I don't think that did anything. Most of this is fail. Most of this is either user error or just my not doing great with my experiments. But we did get nicer paints out of it, I guess. Overall, though, it seems like I'm probably just going to be trying again to make a piece using this crappy art kit, but with slightly thicker paint. Woo! I'm not mad about this. I'm actually quite happy with how this piece turned out. Does that mean that I think that it has anything to do with the supplies? Not really. Does that mean that this kit is worth it by any measure? By any measure? Absolutely not. However, I think that I've just been having a really good time with playing around with traditional art. There's a malleability to it that isn't as present in digital art, definitely. So I'm always happy to get something that looks so cool. Look at it. Look at it. The camera does it a bunch more justice. Like, it's not as smooth as it looks, but like from a distance, that doesn't matter. So I don't know. There was something about this one that I love it. I love it. Let me show you the old one. Now, in their defense, these are very different things. This is definitely a bit more of a painting, and this one is more of a drawing. And I think that you can tell. Yeah, you can definitely tell. And I think that the cornstarch approach in the paints is definitely what helped achieve this really nice, flat, matte look to this wolf, and I really appreciate that for this method. It did leave the paints a little chunky, but that might have just been a mixing error on my part. Just in some regards, there were some little, like, bubbles that would come up every now and again that I had to get rid of. But as it is now, it is gorgeous, I think. It looks so cool. I love it. It looks a little bit more like a husky than a wolf. But I'm not crying about it, so yeah, I had a lot of fun with this. Despite using materials that I'm not the biggest fan of. It's always nice to be able to do that, to do something that turns out okay. But I think last time I wound up saying the exact opposite, which is that you hate it when things don't really turn out the way that you want them to. So, you know, my mood is obviously quite a bit more heightened by the fact that I made something that I actually like. So, that's great. Again, does it justify the kit? Not whatsoever. I think that I could totally make this with something less expensive and more comprehensive or more specialized or anything like that. It's not worth $50. What did I spend on it? I don't even remember at this point. But I like my wolf. I do. So, yeah. And, of course, the watercolor approach to the paints you probably saw on the process video was unsuccessful, relatively, because I think that a lot of the pigment maybe didn't make it back into the watercolors. So when they dried, they got significantly lighter, and they were really hard to actually even see. So that's something, I guess, that's definitely a fault on my part. And, I mean, like, if I had done them normally, I still don't know if I would have been able to get, like, the other materials to cooperate with them. It's kind of up in the air whether or not they would, although that could have just been the fault of the colored pencils because they're crappy. Everything in the kit is kind of crappy. It's just the nature of it, so, you know. But I am, again, very happy with I guess, practically the painting that I made. Very illustrative painting. This definitely wasn't a video to prove that these hacks worked. I think that folks like Super Ray Dizzle, who I got most of this stuff from, definitely did more of a justice toward actually trying out these hacks with things that could work. The watercolor one was definitely just an experiment on my part, along with the papers. Most of the stuff that I had wasn't stuff that would have been able to have been fixed. I guess maybe with the petroleum jelly and the colored pencils. That just turned the crappy colored pencils greasy. But that could be my fault, that could be their fault. I don't know. So, that one I'm not going to necessarily debunk. It's just messy. Which, I mean, if you're using colored pencils, then that's probably not totally what you want. But who am I to judge? It could totally work. I also did try to use one method that I totally forgot about until I was actively working on the piece, which was using a blending marker for alcohol markers on the colored pencils, and that actually did work. I would think that was running out of alcohol or something, or I'm not totally sure. But yeah, I wound up not using it fully because I wound up going over everything with the pastels to get that texture in the background, which turned out okay, I think. They're definitely different than the crayons as I've used them. Like, you just gotta press down with them really hard. And they leave an interesting texture behind. I just don't know if that's the intention of a decent oil pastel. I'm not used to them, so. Regardless, my consensus remains the same. This was just an experiment to see if I could play around with this kit and try and make it a little bit better, or maybe just try another attempt at making a piece that I liked with it. And I did! So, that's a success at least. Again, like, in terms of, like, art stuff especially, it's definitely up to the consumer to decide whether or not something is worth the time and the effort to use or to make better, and I don't think that this is. So yeah, it was somewhat worth it to me, I guess, for the entertainment value and because I already bought the kit. That's it for me in that regard. You know, the amount of time that I spent on it was still way too much and still resulted in way too little of a change for me to consider this kit any differently. So yeah, that's neither here nor there. So yeah, if you want to try out these hacks, I would definitely recommend you do, but maybe just with cheap art supplies that you can get for like $1. And you know, the supplies definitely don't make the creator, but just don't buy art kits. Don't buy art kits unless you see like one that seems particularly different from the ones that are usually sold, because they're not good. So, you know, especially ones that say they're for adults and artists, apparently, which again was the only reason I picked up the original kit. So yeah, those are my final thoughts. Let me know what you think, and here's Wolfie again. I love it. Look at it. The colors are so like, bah. Anyway, at that, I'm going to leave this here. If you like this video, give it a like, obviously, and subscribe if you want to see more art challenges in the future. I might try and do more traditional stuff, but obviously I still need to get a better camera setup for that. But I do other fun art challenges, obviously, almost every week. So stop by, say hi, subscribe. I'm almost at 100, which is crazy, and that's my next goal, so help me out. At that though, yes. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see y'all next time.